You've been taught that the antidote to your suffering is more money, more status, more experiences, or more self-care. You are running on a treadmill that never stops, convinced that if you just reach the next level, you will finally be happy. But here is the cruel, hidden truth that Arthur Schopenhauer discovered 2 centuries ago. You are not suffering because you are missing something. You are suffering because you want. Your very desire to be happy is the mechanism that keeps you in agony. The secret to ending your suffering isn't in adding to your life. It is in a cold, brutal, and necessary act of subtraction that most people are too terrified to even consider. We live in a culture of relentless pursuit. We are conditioned to treat every dissatisfaction as a technical problem to be solved with the right acquisition. We believe that life is a series of gaps, a gap between who we are and who we want to be, between what we have and what we need. Schopenhauer, however, famously argued that life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. When we want, we suffer from the lack. When we get what we want, we suffer from the inevitable, hollow realization that it didn't solve our fundamental restlessness. We are perpetually hungry, and the food we consume only makes us thirstier. In the language of American psychology, Schopenhauer's will to live is the biological engine of the ego. It is the irrational, blind urge that forces us to chase goals that provide only temporary relief. Today, we call this the hedonic treadmill. We invest our identity in our cravings. And when the brain realizes that the reward for those cravings is fleeting, it triggers a state of anxious depletion. Schopenhauer doesn't offer a mindfulness app to help you cope with this. He offers a diagnostic tool that reveals the absurdity of the entire pursuit. Ending suffering, according to this perspective, is not about finding the perfect life hack. It is about the radical disidentification from the will itself. It is a process of learning how to stand in the eye of your own internal storm, watching your desires arise and fall without needing to be enslaved by them. In this video, we are going to dismantle the mechanics of your desire loop, explore the psychological trap of the self, and examine why, in a world that demands you want more, the most powerful thing you can do is learn to want nothing at all. Let's look at the cruel, beautiful, and necessary truth about your suffering. The human condition is defined by a deep, persistent, and often agonizing restlessness. You have felt it on a Sunday evening when you are safe, fed, and comfortable, yet you feel a vague, gnawing sense of dissatisfaction that makes you want to reach for your phone or seek out a distraction. You have felt it when you reach a long-sought goal, only to find that the victory feels hollow within days. This is not a malfunction of your personality. It is the fundamental reality of your biological design. Arthur Schopenhauer called this the will to live, and it is the most potent, yet most invisible, force in your life. It is the blind, irrational, and ceaseless compulsion that drives every living creature to strive, to grow, and to survive, regardless of whether that striving actually produces happiness. To understand why you are constantly suffering, you must first stop viewing your desires as rational choices. We like to believe that we want a better job, a new car, or a perfect relationship because we have analyzed these things and decided they would make us better off. But Schopenhauer argued that this is a fantasy. Your desires are not products of your intellect. They are expressions of a blind, biological urge that cares nothing for your contentment. The will to live is not a person, it is a force. It is the same force that pushes a plant to grow toward the light or a predator to hunt its prey. In humans, this force has been filtered through consciousness, and it has become the engine of our suffering. This will is fundamentally insatiable. Think about how your body works. It requires fuel, so it creates hunger. You eat, the hunger is satisfied, and for a few minutes, you are at peace. But then, the hunger returns. It always returns. Your biological systems are built on the principle of a recurring need. The will to live functions exactly the same way in your psychology. It creates a state of lack. It presents you with a vision of a future where you will finally be complete, but the moment you achieve that vision, the will creates a new lack. It is a treadmill that is wired into your very DNA. You are not meant to be satisfied. You are meant to be hungry, because hunger ensures survival, while satisfaction is a state of stillness that evolution views as a potential threat. This is why you are a victim of your own biology. Your brain is a prediction machine that is constantly scanning the environment for threats and opportunities. It is programmed to focus on what is missing because that is what kept our ancestors alive. If you are constantly looking for what is wrong, you remain vigilant. If you are satisfied, you might let your guard down. Therefore, your brain is biased against happiness. It is biased toward a state of mild, chronic agitation. When you feel that sense of, I need something more, you are feeling your evolutionary programming, attempting to keep you in a state of high alert, ready to strive for the next thing. You are fighting a war against a system that is designed to keep you from ever reaching the finish line. The cruel secret here is that your intellect is not the master of this process. It is merely a servant. You think you are using your brain to decide what you want, but your brain is actually using your intellect to justify the cravings of the will. When you feel a sudden, irrational desire for status or for a specific achievement, your intellect rushes in to build a complex narrative about why that goal is essential to your happiness. You convince yourself that you are being strategic, that you are building a life, or that you are pursuing excellence. But in reality, you are just a puppet dancing to the tune of a biological compulsion that doesn't care about your well-being. It only cares about the next cycle of striving. This also explains why we are so prone to the illusion of choice. We feel that we have the power to decide who we are and what we want, but our options are almost always limited by the deep, unconscious drives that we share with all other creatures. We want to be loved, we want to be safe, we want to be respected, and we want to be comfortable. These are the 4 pillars of the will. Almost everything you do, from the career you choose to the way you dress, to the arguments you have with your partner, can be traced back to one of these 4 primitive biological drives. You are not choosing your values. You are inheriting them from millions of years of evolutionary trial and error. You are living out a script that was written long before you were born. Recognizing this is the first step to ending the cycle of suffering. When you realize that the itch for more is not a personal failing, but a biological mechanism, you can stop taking it so personally. When you feel that familiar spike of anxiety because you haven't reached your goal, or that sudden, sinking feeling of inadequacy when you compare yourself to others, you can pause. You can look at those feelings and realize, this is not me. This is the will to live, acting out its programmed desire for more. This realization creates a vital space between you and your emotions. You are no longer the one who is suffering. You are the one who is observing the suffering. That shift in perspective is the first crack in the prison wall. Most people spend their entire lives identifying with the will. They think, I am a person who needs this. I am a person who lacks that. Or I am a person who must achieve this. They own their cravings. They treat their impulses as their own deepest truths. But Schopenhauer would tell you that the truth is the exact opposite. Your cravings are the things that prevent you from ever truly being yourself. They are the noise that drowns out your actual existence. By identifying with your desires, you are allowing your biological programming to hijack your consciousness. You have become a servant to a system that is programmed to keep you perpetually hungry. This is why we find ourselves in such a state of modern exhaustion. We have created a world that is designed to stimulate the will to live at an unprecedented scale. Marketing, social media, and the constant digital stream of comparison are all designed to tap into those ancient, primitive drives for status, safety, and belonging. They are turning the volume up on the will to live until it is screaming in our ears. We are bombarded with reasons to feel lack, and our brains are reacting exactly as they are designed to. They are entering a state of chronic, high-intensity striving. We are physically and mentally drained because we are responding to millions of evolutionary triggers every single day. To break this burden, you have to cultivate a degree of suspicion toward your own desires. When you find yourself wanting something intensely, ask yourself, is this a rational, measured choice, or is this a biological itch? When you feel a sense of intense fear about a potential outcome, ask, is this a real threat to my survival? Or is this the will to live panicking because it is losing a sense of control? By questioning your own impulses, you start to regain your authority. You stop being a passive recipient of your biological drives and start becoming a conscious monitor of them. You start to see that you do not have to obey every command your body gives you. You can have an impulse and choose not to act on it. That act of refusal is the most powerful thing you can do. This is the beginning of the ascetic life that Schopenhauer recommended. Not in the sense of living in a cave and starving yourself, but in the sense of living in the world without being enslaved by it. It is the ability to enjoy things without needing them. It is the ability to work toward goals without being devastated by the results. It is the ability to inhabit your body and your life, while knowing that the drives behind your actions are not the center of your universe. You are the space in which these drives occur, but you are not the drives themselves. The will to live is a heavy, relentless, and often cruel master. It will push you to do things you don't want to do, and it will keep you up at night with desires that serve no purpose other than to keep you in the race. But it is not omnipotent. It is a force of nature, and like all forces of nature, it can be understood, anticipated, and navigated. By acknowledging your biology as a burden, you stop blaming yourself for the struggle of existence. You accept that you are a human being, trapped in a body and a brain that are designed for a much harder, much simpler life than the one you are living. Once you make that peace, the suffering doesn't stop, because the will doesn't stop. But your relationship to the suffering changes completely. You become a traveler who knows the road, instead of a prisoner who thinks the cage is the whole world. The fundamental reality of human life, as Schopenhauer so incisively observed, is that we are trapped in a swinging pendulum. On one side of the arc, there is pain. On the other, there is boredom. This is the rhythm of your daily existence, the internal clock that governs your sense of satisfaction or despair. When you want something, you experience the tension of lack, the pain of not having what you desire. When you finally achieve that goal, you experience a fleeting moment of relief, which almost immediately evaporates into the crushing stillness of boredom. Because we are never meant to be satisfied, we are doomed to perpetually reset our expectations and begin the swing again. The mechanism driving this pendulum is the desire loop. Think about the last time you were truly hungry. You felt a physical and psychological tension that demanded to be resolved. That tension is pain. You sought out food, you consumed it, and for a short time, you felt a sense of equilibrium. But what happened next? The hunger faded, and in its place came a void. You weren't satisfied. You were simply finished with the previous task. Without a new task, without a new desire to occupy your attention, you were left alone with yourself. In that silence, you felt the weight of boredom, the realization that having everything you thought you wanted did not actually change the fundamental condition of your life. Modern psychology calls this the hedonic treadmill. It is the observation that humans quickly return to a relatively stable level of happiness, despite major positive or negative events or life changes. If you get the promotion, your happiness spikes, but within weeks or months, your brain resets your baseline. You are back to your old self, looking for the next promotion to feel that same spike again. The system is designed to keep you running. It is a biological trick to ensure you keep striving, keep working, and keep moving. Because a stationary organism is a target for extinction. But for the modern individual living in a world of relative abundance, this mechanism is a recipe for chronic unhappiness. The tragedy of the narcissism of small differences is that we have become experts at inflating minor problems to keep the engine of desire running. When you have satisfied your basic biological needs, you do not simply stop wanting. You start wanting things that are increasingly symbolic. You start obsessing over your status, your image, the brand of your clothes, the quality of your social interactions, and the subtle ways in which you are being perceived by your peers. You find deep existential meaning in the fact that your neighbor got a new car or that your colleague received a shout-out you felt you deserved. You are manufacturing pain so that you don't have to face the boredom of your own existence. This is the futility of achievement. We spend our lives building towards peaks that, once reached, turn out to be nothing more than vantage points to see the next peak. We are blindsided by the post-victory blues, that hollow feeling that hits you on a Monday morning after you have finished a project you spent months working on. You expected a transformation of your soul. You got a trophy, a paycheck, or a pat on the back, and the next day, you woke up feeling exactly the same as you did before. This is because the goal was never the point. The achievement was just a temporary anchor to keep the ship of your desire from drifting into the open sea of boredom. Boredom is not a trivial feeling. It is the most honest emotion you have. It is the moment when the mask of the will to live slips off and you are forced to look at the machinery of your own life. It is the feeling of realizing that you have been running on a treadmill for years, and now that you have stopped, you realize you haven't actually moved anywhere. Boredom is the threat of the void. It is the moment where you are confronted with your own lack of inherent purpose. Most people are so terrified of this that they will do anything to escape it. They will pick up their phones, they will turn on the television, they will start unnecessary arguments, or they will bury themselves in work. Anything is better than sitting in the chair and realizing that the pendulum has stopped and there is nothing holding you up. The pendulum swings because the will to live is essentially a hungry ghost. It can never be full. If you give it everything, it simply grows a bigger stomach. If you deny it, it screams louder. The only way to win this game is to understand that the game itself is rigged. You have been playing a game where the only options are to be in pain because you want, or to be bored because you have. There is a third option, but it requires you to step off the treadmill entirely. It requires you to observe the pendulum without needing to be the one swinging it. To do this, you must change how you view your own restlessness. Stop calling it ambition or drive or passion. Start calling it what it is, the biological pressure to stay in the loop. When you feel that familiar itch to change your circumstances, recognize it as the pendulum swinging back toward the side of pain. When you feel that sense of hollowness after a success, recognize it as the pendulum swinging into the side of boredom. By labeling these states, you create a distance between your consciousness and the mechanism of the will. You stop being the pendulum. You become the space in which the pendulum is swinging. This shift in perspective is the beginning of true peace. It doesn't mean you stop living. It means you stop being lived by your desires. You can continue to work, you can continue to build, and you can continue to enjoy the pleasures of life, but you do it with the awareness that these things are not the source of your existence. You stop looking for your fulfillment in the next swing of the pendulum. You realize that your contentment cannot be found on either side of the arc, because the arc itself is the source of the trouble. You find your contentment in the stillness that exists when you stop trying to chase the next and stop running from the current. This is the cruel secret. The life you are currently living is a cycle of distraction designed to prevent you from feeling the weight of your own existence. Every goal, every ambition, every craving is just a way to keep the pendulum moving so you don't have to face the silence. But if you are brave enough to let the pendulum slow down, if you are brave enough to sit with the boredom and the emptiness, you will find something you never expected. You will find that underneath the pain of wanting and the boredom of having, there is a reality that doesn't need to be satisfied. There is a reality that is perfectly fine just as it is. The next time you feel that surge of desire for something you think will fix your life, stop. Watch the desire. Feel the tension in your body, the agitation of your mind, the promise of the future. Then, wait. Watch how the desire eventually passes, just as everything else does. Notice the hollow space left behind. Don't rush to fill it with a new desire. Don't rush to numb it with a new distraction. Just stay with the emptiness. Stay with the boredom. Learn to be comfortable in the space where you don't want anything. This is the most countercultural, most difficult, and most liberating thing you can do. You are breaking the pendulum. You are stepping out of the loop. And for the first time in your life, you are not a slave to the swing. You are the master of your own presence. The ascetic shift is not about moving to a desert, wearing rags, or denying yourself the basic necessities of life. In the modern American context, the term asceticism has been dangerously misinterpreted as a form of self-punishment or performative deprivation. For Schopenhauer, true asceticism is a psychological act of deep, radical clarity. It is the practice of disidentifying from the ego, the I, that is constantly demanding, desiring, and suffering. It is the realization that your suffering is not happening to you, but to an identity you have constructed. By shifting your perspective, you stop being the victim of your own life and start being the witness to it. The ego is the command center of the will to live. It is the part of your mind that gathers memories, ambitions, and fears to weave a coherent story about who you are. This story is the source of all your friction. When you believe that I am a successful person, you become terrified of failure. When you believe that I am a person who deserves to be loved, you become terrified of rejection. You have attached your existence to these labels, and every time the world challenges one of them, you experience a jolt of pain. The ascetic shift is the systematic process of detaching from these labels. It is the act of looking at your ego not as your master, but as a character you are playing on a stage. This is a practice that aligns perfectly with what modern psychologists call cognitive diffusion. When you are suffering, you are usually fused with your thoughts. You don't think, I am having a thought, that I am a failure. You think, I am a failure. That tiny shift in language is the difference between freedom and bondage. The ascetic shift takes this further by teaching you to view all of your desires, your pride, your anxieties, and your goals from a distance. You learn to watch the ego as it pushes you to seek status, as it recoils from criticism, and as it craves comfort. You observe it with the same detachment that a scientist uses to watch a specimen under a microscope. You are no longer the one who is angry. You are the one who is noticing that anger is occurring within the field of your consciousness. This disidentification is the antidote to the pendulum of pain and boredom. When you are fused with the ego, every swing of the pendulum feels like a life or death event. When the pendulum swings toward pain, you scream because you feel you are being destroyed. When it swings toward boredom, you panic because you feel your identity is fading. But when you disidentify, you realize that the pendulum is swinging in a space that is far larger than your ego. The pain is just a sensation. The boredom is just a state of mind. They are passing events, like weather patterns, and they do not define the core of your existence. You become the sky, and your emotions are just the clouds. Schopenhauer suggested that the most profound way to accelerate this shift is through the practice of compassion. This is why his ethics were so focused on the dissolution of the boundary between the self and the other. When you are trapped in the ego, you are stuck in a prison of me versus you. You see others as obstacles, as competitors, or as tools for your own advancement. This self-fixation is a massive drain on your energy, and it is a guaranteed recipe for misery. Compassion is the radical act of realizing that the suffering you feel is the same suffering that every other living creature feels. When you look at someone else, you are not seeing a stranger. You are seeing the will to live in another form, struggling under the same weight of desire and lack that you are. This realization breaks the toxic cycle of self-fixation. When you can genuinely feel the suffering of others, your own problems start to lose their sharp, ego-driven edges. You realize that your personal dramas are small, repetitive, and ultimately not very important. This is not about feeling guilty or becoming a martyr. It is about expanding your sense of self until it includes everyone. When you see that the I is just a thin, fragile boundary, you stop protecting it so fiercely. You become more open, more resilient, and more connected. You find that by losing your ego, you gain the world. You are no longer navigating life as an isolated, threatened entity. You are navigating it as a part of a larger, shared reality. To practice this, start by noticing the I in your internal dialogue. How many times a day do you think about yourself? How many times do you feel hurt because my work was not appreciated or my opinion was ignored? These are the moments to trigger the shift. Catch the my. Catch the I. Ask yourself, who is the I that is suffering right now? You will find that there is no solid I. There is only a collection of reactions and stories. When you see this, the suffering loses its grip on you. You don't have to suppress the feeling, and you don't have to fix the situation. You just have to acknowledge that the ego is doing what the ego does, and you choose not to follow it down the rabbit hole. This is the ascetic shift. It is a move from the narrow, defensive, and desperate life of the ego toward a life of openness and objective observation. It is the choice to value clarity over comfort and truth over the satisfaction of your cravings. You will find that this practice brings a sense of quiet, a profound stillness that the striver can never understand. You are not losing anything. You are getting rid of the excess weight that was preventing you from seeing reality clearly. You are becoming a person who can handle the swings of the pendulum without being tossed around by them. This does not mean you stop participating in life. You still work, you still build, you still love, and you still enjoy. But you do it with a new quality of presence. You do it with the lightness of someone who knows that the play is just a play. You are fully engaged in the scene, but you are not terrified if the curtain falls. You are the actor, but you are not the character. When you can live with this degree of separation, you are finally free. You are no longer waiting for the next hit of success to make you feel real. You are real. You have always been real. The ego was just a shadow that was hiding you from yourself. So, lean into the ascetic shift. When the world demands that you want more, choose to be content with what is. When the ego demands that you defend your image, choose to remain silent. When the pendulum swings, stay centered. This is a difficult path, and it is a path that you will have to walk alone, because it goes against everything the culture tells you is valuable. But it is the only path that leads out of the prison of your own desires. It is the only path that leads to the rest you have been searching for, not in a future you can't reach, but in the truth of this moment, right here, right now, as you are. The ultimate realization of Schopenhauer's philosophy is that the secret to a life of peace is not to accumulate more, but to demand less. We live in a society that prides itself on demanding excellence, demanding growth, demanding happiness, demanding that the world conform to our specific set of expectations. We treat our lives like a set of terms and conditions, and when the world fails to meet them, we feel betrayed. But practical subtraction is the art of canceling those demands. It is the practice of systematically removing the conditions you have placed upon your own contentment. When you live without demands, you stop being a beggar of the universe and become a master of your own internal landscape. To live without demands, you must first perform a demand audit. Most people don't even realize how many invisible contracts they have signed with reality. You have a demand that your work must be fulfilling. You have a demand that your partner must understand you perfectly. You have a demand that your body must be healthy and attractive. You have a demand that your future must be secure. Each of these is a latent source of suffering. If the world doesn't deliver, you suffer. The demand is the trigger, the suffering is the bullet. By identifying these demands, you are not giving up on your goals, but you are stripping away the psychological debt that makes you feel like you are failing every time life deviates from your script. Subtraction is a process of lowering your threshold of desire. This doesn't mean becoming apathetic or lazy. It means recalibrating your expectations so that the baseline of your life is enough. When your threshold for happiness is set extremely high, requiring perfect outcomes, constant praise, and guaranteed security, you are guaranteeing yourself a life of dissatisfaction. You are putting your emotional stability into the hands of external variables that you cannot control. But when you lower your threshold, when you find a deep, quiet satisfaction in the simplicity of being alive, in the functioning of your senses, in the intellectual curiosity of the present moment, you become untouchable. You are no longer vulnerable to the shifting winds of fortune. Living without demands is the ultimate expression of the ascetic shift. It is the decision to move from the mode of acquisition to the mode of appreciation. When you walk into a room, you aren't scanning it for what you can get, what you can change, or what you can extract to feed your ego. You are scanning it for what you can appreciate. This is a radical shift in energy. Acquisition is inherently aggressive. It requires energy, focus, and the constant feeling of lacking something. Appreciation is inherently peaceful. It requires attention, presence, and the feeling of having enough. By choosing appreciation, you are choosing to stop the biological treadmill of the will to live. This practice is intensely difficult because your environment is constantly screaming at you to demand more. Our entire economic system is built on the premise that you are incomplete without the next product, the next experience, or the next promotion. Every advertisement is an attempt to create a demand in your mind that you did not have 5 minutes ago. To live without demands is to be a rebel in a culture of consumption. It is to look at the infinite array of things you could be doing, having, or becoming, and to say, I am perfectly fine exactly as I am. This is the ultimate act of psychological defiance. Start small. Look at your daily routine and find one demand you are placing on the day. Do you demand that your morning coffee be perfect? Do you demand that the traffic move quickly? Do you demand that your coworkers be brilliant? When these demands aren't met, you feel a jolt of anger or frustration. That feeling is your teacher. It is showing you exactly where you have surrendered your peace to an external condition. The practice is simple. When the demand isn't met, don't double down. Don't fight the reality. Instead, breathe. Notice the tension. Recognize that the tension is coming from your demand, not from the event. Then, release the demand. Say to yourself, I prefer things to be different, but I do not demand it. This simple phrase, I prefer, but I do not demand, is the most powerful tool you have for ending suffering. It allows you to maintain your preferences, your goals, and your ambitions, but it removes the sting of failure. You can strive for a promotion with all your heart, but if you don't get it, you don't collapse, because your self-worth was never tied to the result. You weren't demanding the promotion, you were simply preferring it. You are still the same person, with the same inherent value, regardless of the outcome. This is the freedom of the person who has learned to play the game without being enslaved by the stakes. As you continue to subtract these demands, you will find that your life becomes remarkably quiet. The constant background noise of "I need this" and "I should have" that begins to fade. In that silence, you will discover a clarity that you have never experienced before. You will see things as they are, not as you want them to be. You will see the beauty in things you previously ignored because you were too busy looking for the next big thing. You will see that you are already living in a world that is full, rich, and more than enough, provided you are willing to look at it without the colored glasses of your cravings. Practical subtraction is the process of returning to the void. We spend our lives trying to fill the void, but the void is where we actually belong. The void is the space of possibility, the space of stillness, the space of the unconditioned self. When you stop demanding that the world fill your void, you realize that you are the one who fills it. You are the source. You don't need the universe to give you purpose. You are the one who creates it. You don't need the world to make you happy. You are the one who chooses to experience it. By taking away the demands, you are not losing your life. You are finally beginning to see the one you have been living all along. The end of this journey is not a destination. It is the realization that you have reached the place you were trying to find the entire time. You were never lost. You were just distracted. You were never incomplete. You were just convinced that you were. The cruel secret of Schopenhauer is that the suffering was always self-inflicted, but the grace of that realization is that the remedy was always within your own power. You can stop the loop. You can step off the pendulum. You can drop the demands. You can be silent. You can be present. You can be content. And you can do it right now, without a single thing in your life having to change, except for the one thing that matters most, your willingness to want nothing more than what is already here.